I want to start off by thanking you all for participating at our webinar today titled Data-Driven Strategy and Culture in the Organization. At the very beginning, I want to thank Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Alam, Program Manager, Trust and Safety, South Asia region for TikTok, for kindly accepting our invitation to be the guest speaker today. The Nordic Chamber started its journey in 2010 as a joint initiative of the Nordic embassies and the Nordic business operating in Bangladesh. Our goal was to be the unified voice of the business community and promote their interest. We have come a long way since then. We are providing a platform for discussing and exchanging views on business conditions. We are cooperating with stakeholders, including the government, and addressing issues affecting Nordic companies through various NCCI initiatives. Moreover, we work as a contact point for Nordic businesses looking to invest here. Over the past years, we have hosted several events, seminars, webinars on different topics, such as the Finance Bill 2021-22, the geopolitical and geoeconomic opportunities in Bangladesh, macroeconomic outlook, energy financing, sustainable foreign direct investment, ease of doing business, etc. We have also published the Bangladesh Investment Booklet 2021 and launched the Nordic Talk series, a virtual discussion with stakeholders, which you can access through our YouTube and Facebook channel. Today's webinar, we will begin with a short welcome address from Mr. Tarin Aman, President, Nordic Chamber of Commerce. Then I will invite the guest speaker to deliver his address. Please note, there will be a question and answer session following his address. I would request all the participants to write your questions in the chat box. We will call upon you to ask your question during the Q&A session. Without further delay, I would request Mr. Tarin Aman, President, Nordic Chamber of Commerce and Industries in Bangladesh, to start the program with his welcome address. Tarin, bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Mashroor. Members, representatives from the Nordic embassies, participants, and our guest speaker for this webinar, Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Alam. A very warm welcome to you all. I will keep my welcome speech short so that we can begin the part we are all here for. This year, 2022, marks 50 years of independence of Bangladesh. The country has received innumerable accolades and has been dubbed as an economic miracle in the world stage. The Nordic countries recognized Bangladesh soon after our independence and have assisted in our growth in various ways. The total trade volume with the Nordic countries is worth $1.7 billion, and around 5% of the total export goes to the Nordic countries, which are important trading partners. Our economy today is strong, export has increased, and we are an integral part of the global trade. Nordic Chamber has played an instrumental role since its inception in promoting the voice of Nordic companies. We hope to continue on the trajectory and have several events and publications planned for the upcoming months, including sustainability series, roundtable on power sector, and FDI in logistics sector. Today's webinar is a continuation of our effort to inform members about important issues and insights which will assist in the smooth running of their businesses. It is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Alam, Program Manager, Trust and Safety, South Asia Region, TikTok, to deliver his address today on data-driven strategy and culture in the organization. Today, we are constantly speaking about big data, digitization, and digital Bangladesh to be an integral part of our business in the future. However, we believe that there is a need, especially in the context of Bangladesh, to understand what this data is and where it will come from and how to store and use it for our businesses. Understanding data would be of utmost importance in the fourth industrial revolution. Therefore, I'm looking forward to today's webinar. I hope you will all enjoy learning from this session, and I'm looking forward to a lively moderated question and answer session. The NCCI will continue to create an ecosystem which will facilitate much needed conversation and be beneficial not just for our members, but all stakeholders. On behalf of the Executive Committee of the NCCI, I, as the President of the Chamber, welcome you to the webinar. I implore you to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn to stay updated about the upcoming event of the Chamber, and I look forward to your participation. Hope you all enjoy this information session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your welcome remark. I want to briefly introduce our speaker today before handing over the floor to him. Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Alam is currently working in the Trust and Safety Zone of TikTok, looking after the South Asia market. He's a Commonwealth Scholar at the National University of Singapore. His area of research is in innovation and application of machine learning and business strategy. Beside this, Mr. Alam is an analytics advisor of Intelligent Machines Limited, a company working with machine learning and big data, and Upskill, a professional training and certification platform. He has also worked on several other strategic and analytics consultancy projects. Mr. Alam is also a professional trainer for Light Castle Partners, Upskill, GP Accelerator, NUS Executive Education School, and the community manager for Google Business Group Shonarga. Recently, he has worked with IBA Dhaka University to introduce the first ever business analytics course for undergraduates pursuing their BBA. Previously, he obtained his MSc in Operations and Risk Management from University of Manchester and his BBA from IBA Dhaka University. Mr. Alam's consulting work and area of focus include data-driven decision-making, application of machine learning in businesses, helping businesses be strategically data-driven, strategic risk management, and simulation. He also specializes in startup scaling and strategic planning. He has published in world-renowned journals research articles on decision-making and future scenarios. Now, I invite Mr. Alam to deliver his presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much for such a nice introduction, Mashur. And thank you so much for the opportunity as well. Hi, everyone. Give me a second to just open and share my screen here. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, hi, everyone. And again, thank you for finding some time out of your busy schedules. Today's session, I'm going to be very, I would say, conversational. It's about talking about how, say, organizations make the best use of data culture and, like, the data strategy. One of the motivations of this session, actually, when I was I used to work in the data consulting for quite some time. And one of the things that I've noticed over and over again, and that is not only unique to, I would say, Bangladesh, but unique to almost a lot of countries at this point, is that a lot of times companies want to use the best, make the best use of data, but they suffer through a lot of challenges. And that is where I think over time, even when I was a younger consultant on helping companies to be data driven, I used to feel that, just having tools and techniques and technical teams would get the best out of it. But the more we spend time with companies, the more we saw the need of a data strategy. That is having a overall organization culture and a strategic drive towards having data driven decision making within an organization. And that has become very important, or a key thing for an organization to make the best use of data. So today's session, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, because I mean, the field itself is massive: the data science, machine learning, business analytics, data analytics, and there is so much to cover. But today my objective would be to impress upon you how, or with examples as well as logic, that how to best approach now that everything is getting data driven. We are living in a world which is data driven, at which point how to best approach to convert a company to be data driven. So to start with, I'm just going to give you a very simple thought exercise. And the thought exercise is, the moment we hear the word data, if you close your eyes and the moment you think of the word data, what is it that comes to your mind the first time? I would bet it comes like this. Excel has managed to infiltrate almost everywhere. And when we talk about data, we see tables. We see like this, that, columns and rows, columns having different variables, rows having different entries. Even now, when I have actually done this study with many professionals across Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and you'll be surprised that almost 80% of the people, when they're asked about how they can visualize data, they visualize it as a table. But that is something that has been there from 90s. Today, data can be the QR codes that we are picking up from, say, checking into a restaurant, to picking up a QR code to download a, tutorial video of a product that we have made, to say a QR code to, get a YouTube video or even get a subscription. And this is again QR codes or even pictures where I would say history. Today we do as much as videos. So the picture here is of Target. And for example, Target is a convenience store in Australia. And there are quite a lot of supermarkets and convenience stores who actually have video data right now of a consumer walking around. A few days back, I was working with this company here, Cold Storage, which is one of the top convenience stores or supermarkets, I would say. And one of the things they work with is, how people move around in the aisles. Because to them, when initially they used to think of data as like the checkout data, that is what people are buying, how they're buying it. But today they get to know way more. For example, the person I was talking to in this cold storage, she was telling me that, a very interesting thing they see is how many people pick stuff up and then drop them off. Because to them, that's a very important point of data. When they read the videos of people, like when they track the videos of people walking around in the shop, they try to look for what other items people are returning to the aisles. Because to them, they think that that is the one that a little bit of push or upselling could make sure that people are buying it. Because why? If someone has picked up something in the basket and then dropping it in the aisle, that means they are on the verge of buying it. Or should I buy it? Should I get scolded if I buy it and take it home? Is it too expensive? Another thing they notice is also how long a person stands in front of an aisle. And they've actually shown that the more a person walks by or stands in front of an aisle, the more chances of that person buying that item from that aisle. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because data is not anymore limited to two-dimensional tables. It can be comments. For example, Amazon does a lot of analysis of reviews they get of their products. Then again, Google and even like in my company, we do have these one-liner descriptions at the mid of the year or at the end of the year or even like in the end of a quarter of how does your job feel like. And from there, we do topic modeling, we do text analytics to find out like, how people are feeling within an organization. Then again, there is data, videos, there is images, text. These days, even audio is data. So that's how data has evolved, and which makes it important for us to understand that how these new sources of data, how these new capabilities of the data analysis tools can help us drive our strategies, do serve our customers better, and even gain competitive advantage. So, building on that, I wanted to start with sharing two cases. And these two cases I have had experience of working directly with. I mean, me and my team work with these companies. Just to give you an idea, like, how data could change or give competitive advantage. So this is a very interesting company. It's an Indonesian company, Tunaiku. It started off as a peer-to-peer lending platform, but it became also a very big financing platform in Indonesia right now. In fact, the funny thing is, they started off as, I would say, someone who's trying to redefine the industry. And then now the founder of Tunaiku very recently has been added to the like government's financial cabinet. So that's how much impact they have been able to do. So Tunaiku, the story was very simple. That very simple, similar to Bangladesh, Indonesia is a country where banking rate or banking penetration has been not very high. I think when we started the work around 2017, the banking penetration was around 40 to 42%. Now it has improved. So what Tunaiku did is it did something where it's a merger between our BRAC's microfinances as well as building its own lending and borrowing platform. So one challenge was obtaining permission from the Central Bank of Indonesia. But at that point, Indonesia was like, Indonesia saw the growth of Gojek. So they were more interested to, tech-driven solutions. So at that point, they got that license to create peer-to-peer loans as well as, also micro loans and medium-sized loans for SMEs or even organizations. And one of the most interesting thing they did when we started working is we didn't have enough data. We didn't have data on who would be a potential loan defaulter, because when you're entering a market where it's not served by the banks, you don't have transaction data, you don't have purchase data, you don't have previous banking data. So in a situation like that, building up a model on predicting that who has a potential to default, who should I charge a higher interest rate, or who should I ask for higher mortgages, was a big problem for a company which was not a bank. So the founder of Tunaiku actually did something I was personally impressed with, and I'm sharing it. He was getting funding from India's Amar Bank, and because he was an employee there and a very senior employee, so they invested a lot, and he convinced his board to give him significant amount of money as an investment. I think that was a million USD as investment, and he just logicked it this way that I'm gonna throw this money away. How? So he actually say that he's gonna give $1 million worth of loans to anyone and everyone who asks for borrowing from Tunaiku. And he logicked it out with the board saying that this will be an investment. Don't expect to get the money back. The logic was very simple. He gave it to many different size businesses, this loan. And 1 million USD in Indonesian currency is pretty big amount. So he could give to, so he actually created, I think, last that I checked with the data set, he created around 57,000 data points. So he created 57,000 micro loans out of 1 million USD. And he gave it to varied level of people. The answer was simple. It's just he's investing this money, his 1 million. He was not expecting to get any of the money back to create that data. Because out of these 57,000 loans, there was around 30 to 40% which were non-performing loans, which became bad loans, whereas the other ones became good ones. But that was the golden goose we had, because with this 56,000 data points, we could actually build a model to predict who's going to be a defaulter or what sort of behavior leads to defaulting. When we're looking at that defaulting behavior for companies, we were looking at many things, not only the assets and the liabilities they have, not only their financial performance, but also their performance in social media, their performance in, say, how their data bandwidth is looking like, how their purchase of data bandwidth, or even so, it was surprising when we saw that whether a company is going for a corporate postpaid SIM agreement or corporate phone agreement with a company, that had an impact on the chances of a company defaulting on a loan, or chances of an SME or a startup defaulting on a loan. So this was an eye opener, because I mean, normally banks rely on ratios, but what we looked into, we were actually, when we started building this model, we had two approaches. One was we had a financial team which was doing the basic ratios, and then we were the data science team. That was my company helping them. So when we were working with the data science team, our approach was like, anything and everything is a signal, and let's see what is a good signal for defaults. And we saw some very interesting signals for defaults. We saw for example, a firm is more likely to default if they have a raising salary trend without an expansion of the market size. So these are we found out many other insights from there. But the outcome was that right now, Tunaiku is one of those non-banking financial institutions which has one of the best credit prediction models. In fact, the beauty of it is right now, Researchers from MIT are working with Tunaiku. Researchers from MIT, researchers from NUS are working on with Tunaiku to understand their algorithm, which we were working with. And that's why the founder has been also asked to advise on digitization of banking in Indonesia. So this shows that how, if properly, data can be utilized, how much you can gain from it. So today, Tunaiku is one of the largest peer-to-peer as well as institutional lenders who has nowadays their NPL rate, non-performing loan rate, is less than 8%, which is a very impressive number. So this is an example. The other case study I would like to share, and again, something from my personal experience. Now, unfortunately, with this company, I do not have the permission to share the name because they do try to keep their activities a little restricted. But it is a company from Bangladesh who's in the logistics field. And it is a story of how a company from Bangladesh and logistics and supply chain managed to utilize data for some very interesting benefits. So in their logistics, the company was facing challenges in terms of optimal load scheduling. That is, how much load should their trolleys or their trucks and pickups would have, and also optimal routing. So what will be the right combination of routes so that um, the weight, the destination, the warehouses are properly catered for in an optimum way. And this is where again data came in. So we were very impressed by the fact that the strategic board of the company, they were very interested to know that, okay, they have some calculations at this point. They were doing this manually and in Excel, but they were open to new ideas because they were like that even if you can give us an improvement of say 10% reduction in wastage or 5% reduction in fuel costs or even an efficiency of 20% reduction in time, we would be interested to invest in models. So this was another very interesting, I would say, project I tackled with, my team tackled with, where we had these transportation routes, the existing ones, as well as thanks to Google Maps and OpenMap, we had good mapping across Bangladesh, like route maps and everything. And we also had ideas about the vehicle loads, vehicle size, and the amount of payload it can carry. And this led to an algorithm we worked with, which right now allows the company to identify or allocate the right schedules or the right paths. So all they have to do is say that, okay, for the next week, these would be the distributions, these would be the centers of picking up, these would be the centers of dropping off, and these would be the size of the packages. The rest would be optimized by the algorithm we worked with. Now, again, this led to considerable improvements for the company. So previously, besides without the algorithm, they had a team of 7 to 8 people looking at what would be the right route or what would be the right vehicle. Today, it's just one person who gets to enter these details, and the algorithm suggests them. And there is another one person they employ as QC, quality checking. But that is again an interesting use case of how simple data, and this is not when we talk about data, sometimes we do think that data could be large amounts of data, lots of information. The one example I gave from Tunaiku, but the Bangladesh example, it's very simple. It was very straightforward. It's just knowing the routes, knowing the costs, knowing fuel costs, and knowing the package sizes. That was it. Then it was all about trying out different combinations. And that's the power of data we have, because when we ran these combinations, I'll give you an estimation that for each route, we ran around 20 to 30 permutations, and the company had around 300 such routes. So the algorithm goes through today 10,000 options to give them the optimal routes. And that is done with a simple computer. It's not, we don't even require complex systems. A simple computer, a simple laptop manages to do it in 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes. So that's the beauty of properly utilizing data. Now, for both these cases, the reason I picked both these cases, one was because I had a live chat with Mashrur about this, like, which ones would benefit our members attending today. But more importantly, the reason of picking these two cases is because both of the cases had something very interesting in common. Both of them, they not only had data, because today I believe a lot of companies have data. So I'll digress a little bit. 2015, I was working with my mentor, and we were talking about different things we can do with data. So she was someone very connected in the garments industry, and she told me that, let's go to our garments and see what data they have. So when I went to that factory, I was asking for data, and they were like, dude, I mean, things happen very manually here. You won't get data automation, stuff like that here. But then I saw a few computers they had, and I was going through those computers, and then I asked some questions related to what files do they have these in computers. They showed me a compliance file. Compliance file had data on every person coming in, how much unit someone's producing, who was mentored by which person, who was the line manager, who was the floor manager, which was the supplier, which when they sent it to the supplier, what was the quality check, everything. That was one of the richest data sets I've seen in a company who think that data is not going to benefit them. The reason I'm telling you this is because today we live in a time when we are collecting data, whether we want it or not. There's massive amounts of data out there. To get the best benefit of the data, it's like I see a lot of companies making a mistake of like, let's have technical people in our data center and we will get the best out of the data. No, both these cases, they've been successful for one common reason. They had a data strategy in mind. Their founder, so for Tunaiku, the founder of Tunaiku, I find this guy, although he's from complete banking sector, I find this guy to be one of the most data savvy person I've met. And even for this logistics company I'm talking about, their founders and their senior management always thought that data would bring benefits to them. They just wanted to know how to best approach it. And I think that motivates the rest of the talk that I'm going to give. That what are the challenges? We only hear about the good things about data, right? But one key challenge many companies do complain is that we do have moderate to low return on investment because it is expensive. So if we are building like, if you're, for example, if you're just subscribing to dashboard software like Power BI or Tableau, it could be prohibitively expensive for a company. So one funny example was like, last year I was training Brack's microfinance team on how to better predict a defaulter. And while chatting with them, I found out that Bragg has a subscription for Tableau for 50 employees, which, trust me, is a huge cost. I was checking Tableau subscriptions. I mean, I asked my university to supply me one. So it's very expensive. So any data tool can become expensive. Good data resources can be expensive as well. So there is a, like, if the gain is not much, then it would definitely lead to a low ROI. The second is, I would say, a lack of vision, because a lot of times companies think that, okay, they do have some data there. Now, introducing some data savvy person or someone with some experience with data and giving them that data set would solve their problem. An example is 2018, me and my professor, we were approached by Three, the Australian telco. And Three gave us a very big amount of data and say that, okay, with that data, can you predict can you predict like which people are gonna get our products? Like, how do you expand the market? Build us some models on like, who would be more likely to subscribe. Now, that data was like really big. And when we went through the data for a week, we both went back to the company with a bad news. And the bad news was that thank you for sharing that data, but it's not something with which you will get your answer because that data was about existing customers. We cannot analyze existing customer to figure out who is going to be my new customer or who's leaving me. For that, I need to check what other people are out there. So a lot of times, even if you have the data, it's very important for management, for leadership, to know what sort of questions can be asked to the data. What sort of insights can you get from the data? Otherwise, you can just connect to a consultant or build a data team and give them data and might not get outcomes out of it because you're not asking the right question. The trick to getting the best out of the data is actually connecting the data to the vision of the company, to the strategy of the company, to the goals of the company. The third, obviously, is like this is a new field. So I would say, I won't say that there is a lack of supply of talent. In my opinion, what I've seen is lack of connecting the right talent. Because I've been in the teaching zone from 2013, and I do have mentor people even now in the area of data. And one of the things that I sadly see is that the job description for a data scientist is or a data analyst is not even standard. So someone who's good at, say, Python modeling can be taken as a data analyst, and then a lot of companies assign them to be just a database manager. Then again, I see people who are very good with SQL, good with machine learning, are sitting down with Excel because that was the role they have been hired for. So this is where I think like there is a very big amount of mismatch of the right talent to the right place. And finally, one of the reasons I see that, data, like there is a low ROI on data is because a lot of companies do fear the change. They would be like, fine, we have this data, but this is because data does require a lot of investment. So it's natural to be afraid of the change. I've seen and it from managers as well, mid-level managers or senior managers that, they would be like, okay, machine learning, that's very complicated. How would I know how to code? How would I know how to learn? But the beauty of it is that you don't have to. You just need to have the basic concept of where what tool gives a good answer and then know where to get the right talent to build that tool. So I think these are a few of the challenges that is still out there, which hampers a lot of companies to be really data driven. And that is where I come with three suggestions. So I'm almost nearing the end of the rant I'm giving to you about the data. So the first suggestion, or I would say it's a tool that I found pretty useful to use, is getting an idea about how your data readiness is within a company. Now, again, these are not coined or published tools. These are more like, simple mind map tools that we consultants use in data. So it's kind of like, getting to know where you are. Because I believe, like, I strongly believe in this advice that, to make any improvements or to design any strategies, the first thing is to understand the as is situation. So that's why I think any company who is interested to be data driven could do a simple audit in terms of like, where they are in terms of data readiness. For example, I would say that, normally there are four levels of data readiness we talk about. The level one is about, you're aware of the benefits of data, but not sure of implementation. That is where I think if your company is there, I think then a level of strategizing, a level of planning broadly in terms of like, how data will help you in your business model. This is the question you need to answer. This is the question you need to work with. Now, if you're in level two, which is like, you're aware of the benefits of the data, you have basic collections and you do have basic reporting. I think even in Bangladesh, I believe a lot of companies are today in level two, where they do have collection and some reporting. The problem with the reporting is that the reporting is on the desk of the analyst and maybe goes to the line manager and then it dies away. So if you are in that place, maybe then the next question would be like, okay, no, fine, I get a report out of the data, but what does it imply for my 6-month goal in the company, for my next quarterly targets, for my 5-year targets? So expanding that reporting to actually strategic decision making, that would be the step you should go for. If you are in level three, which is like, aware, collecting, as well as using them to make forecasts, that means that data is already a significant part of your business because you're making forecasts. And forecast, if you take forecasting seriously, that basically means that you're going to assign your operations, plans, and everything based on the forecasts as well. And finally, we have those companies for whom the data is their business model. In Bangladesh, companies such as Patao, such as Daraz, Food Panda, for them, data is their business model. So I think it's beneficial to for a company to go through this small exercise to find out, like, where is your data level? How ready are you for data? Because if you're in level 1, then the plan is for collection. If you're in level 2, the plan is for strategizing. If you're level 3, then the plan is for implementing better models, improved models. If you're 4, I mean, you can still work on AI, but you're already doing quite well with the data. So that builds to my next tool, which is like, a set of steps on how do you become data driven. Here again, and again, I'll give I would say, PS here to start with, that these are not established methodology and not the only methodology out there. It just comes out of the experience of working with many companies. So it's, I would say, more of an experiential learning rather than a theory. So for example, I would start with, like, if I would start with advice that, go for understanding the data readiness, and also identify which is your key business function. So if you look at the Tunaiku story that I told you, to them, they knew that if they want to build a NPFI institution of lending and borrowing and get like, their main money flow would be from lending and borrowing, they would need to identify who potential defaulters are, because that is their key business function. You make mistakes there, you lose. So to identify that, what is the key business function, what is the main value adding function within your business? And I know that all of you are very well aware of that. But then comes the next question, that how can data help you improve that? How can data make you, like, take that key business function to really creating industry standards to give you competitive edge? I think that is a question. Like, this would make this whole approach top down, but it's important because otherwise you can torture a piece of data set to get any insights, but that might not give you ROI. To get the right ROI, you need to find out, like, which is your key business function and how do you plan to improve that. From there, and this is where I always advise my clients, or anyone who asks for advice, on the third step in a very interesting way. That, okay, now that you know your key business process, which you want to improve with data, then when you're planning on collection, first check whether you have it, because a lot of companies does collect a lot of data and you might actually have the data to improve the business process. Now, if you're planning on collecting more data, then I advise on a very simple mental exercise. Imagine that you can play an omnipotent role. That is, you can get whatever you want, and then design the data that would be the best for improving. Then start cutting from there. That, okay, maybe I cannot get the best, but what is next to best? Maybe I can't get that. Then what is the next to best? Maybe I can't get that. Then what is the next to next best? So that's the way you can actually design a collection which is pretty thorough and covers almost everything. And while collecting, you need to understand of the biases and the limitations in the data, build basic exploration tools, and then create systems of analyzing the data. And here is a very important suggestion, is that, you need to start with a single process first, because I'm also a strong believer of piloting something. Because if you want to revamp the whole organization from scratch, that's a lot of investment, and that's prohibitively scary. So I would start with a single process, which can benefit a lot from data. Then build up on that and see to what extent you can make it data driven. When you do that, see if you can do this whole process into an automation, reducing ad hoc processes, creating a cycle out of it, and then look at the benefits of it. I mean, by the time you go to the analyze step, you'll face many hurdles. I can guarantee you on that you'll face many hurdles, many organization change challenges. But then if you can do that, the next step of automation can easily be scaled towards the rest of the organization after the pilot. So it's a very piloted approach towards implementing data-driven decision making. Now, besides that, while you are doing this, I think another very important thing to do is building the culture. So, for example, right now, I'm working for a company which is very data driven. The big tech and the social media is supremely data driven. And one of the reasons I see it is data driven is because of the culture. So every time, say, as Mashur nicely introduced me, that I'm looking after the South Asia markets. So sometimes I have to suggest things for, doing this in TikTok for Bangladesh or doing this in TikTok for Pakistan. So whenever I go to like a suggestion, that, we need to do this and this and this in Bangladesh, I have to go with a set of evidence to my manager. If I tell them that, okay, you know what, I have 20 years of living in Bangladesh experience, my manager would get back to say that, okay, that's anecdotal. That's good. I'm not going to cut it out. But can you support your hunch with an evidence, with some data, with some trend? Because if you do so, the CEO has already signed it off. So building a culture is important there, because when would you think that your teams or your managers would use more and more data to drive their decisions? When you build that culture. And that's where I think the understanding needs to come from top down. It would be the business leaders to understand what benefits they can get from data. And again, these are not technical stuff. These are basic stuff. These are simple ideas of like, okay, this data gives me this insight. This data gives me this insight. That's it. Even a knowledge of that would make you knowledgeable to check that, whether the managers are supporting their decisions with evidence. I know that there will be situations where finding evidence is hard. That's fine. But asking for evidence as much as possible helps in creating a data culture. So when my team comes up to me, even with a hunch, I get back to them saying that, okay, can you just give me a single data point supporting that hunch? And I'll buy it. So that's from the top down. From the bottom up, that needs investment. That building up, first of all, understanding what to measure and why, building up the right metrics that connects to, finding out your key business process and building up on that. Then investing on databases and data tools, investing on building databases from which anyone can pull up data, relevant data to their role, and work with it. These companies, like, today the data-driven companies have not become data-driven because they were just having the data culture. They also have the tools. Today, when my manager tells me that, okay, Saqif, bring evidence, I have many tools supporting me to get that evidence. So that is the investment required. So it's both investment, but also the managerial understanding, the senior level understanding and appreciation of data-driven decision making that would help you to build that culture. I know that we are running a little short in time, so I'm not going to rant too much on this. But if you find this topic of discussion interesting, I would say you can reach out to me personally, because I did give a podcast in an international show on how to build a data culture, and they had some very interesting questions and answers and discussions there. So would love to share with the team as well, and I'll share the resources so that they can forward the podcast to you as well. The last thing is actually building the right team. The other challenge that, who's right for what. Again, I think to build the right data team, it's very important on a managerial conceptual level understanding, team leader or like business leader conceptual level of understanding of what data can give you, because only then you would know which type of resources to recruit. And another thing that I've seen over time is that getting a, say, just an example here, that getting a computer scientist sitting with the data and telling them that, okay, do data analytics or do help me with my business on data science might not be the right answer. You would need people from both technical and business background, because you need people who are the data strategists, we call, who are the bridge, who has enough exposure to technical, but at the same time has an idea of what a tool can do for the business. And this combination is very important to set up from the start. And finally, the last point is a precursory idea of what can be achieved through data tools and techniques. So I think I went over quite a lot of things in a very short time, and I was quite speedy. So I would want to pause here or stop here and share my sincere thanks to everyone who has suffered through my ranting about data. And I hope I could have added some value there. These are ways of getting in touch with me, but more importantly, I'm open to any questions you have.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Alam, for your valuable presentation. I'm sure that our participants have greatly benefited from your address. I have already mentioned that we are going to have a Q&A. So if participants want to raise their hand or comment on the chat box or actually ask questions directly, I'll open up the floor. But before doing so, I have a question. Um, Saqif, the question is, what are the challenges that Bangladeshi companies that you have seen that Bangladeshi companies struggle with the most in order to be data driven? And I think you've partly covered it, but maybe highlight on that a little bit.
I think, based on my limited experience so far, I think the two issues of challenge is, first of all, leadership buy-in. I think the business leadership, or even like the department leadership buy-in on what data can do, because to them it seems like a lot of times they think of data as an addition, not say revolution or a major change. They think of like, okay, we have the data, let's just crank it and get some more insights. Sometimes you need to go from a top-down approach of understanding what really data goes. So, if I give you an example of like credit risk, so to like really use machine learning or data science for credit risk, it has to be a leadership drive because otherwise it's a major entrenched process in banks and NBFI. So that would be one. The second challenge is again the right match of talents. That is putting the right talent in the right place. I've seen a lot of times that a very technical person put in them business insight roles, which leads to thinking of data from only a technical perspective, not thinking from like broadly how data can drive the business benefits.
Saqif, if I may just add that this is a very intriguing webinar conversation from your end. This is very interesting. There's so much you can do, and we, on an everyday, daily basis, we feed in so much data without even knowing about it. And there's so much we can do about it. As going back to what Mashur was saying, if I may speak from my perspective as a business person, I think the business environment in Bangladesh has changed quite a lot since the new generation have come in. They are more looking into concepts out of the box. They want to do something different. Knowledge has expanded as well. People have studied in various places. They came back to Bangladesh. But I think the challenge right now is more about having the proper guidance, strategists who can actually come and help guide them, organize them, and pinpoint where exactly they can get the benefit by using the data. Because we are collecting data on a daily basis, whether be it a manufacturing process, we're collecting data on our logistics, we're collecting data on our procurements, sales, so many data, but we don't really know how to use it to our benefit. So having a person like you would be fantastic. I think a lot of companies would be able to take benefit from the knowledge that you have. But if you ask me what the biggest challenge is right now in Bangladesh, it's more of finding the right person who can guide us through this.
Exactly. I mean, we do have a lot of, I would say, misconceptions about like, who the data person could be. So sometimes we go a little too technical. And I'm not saying that technical is not the solution, but you need a good balance of both technical as well as getting an idea from the business side of it, which is why I was very happy when Dhaka University IB reached out to me. And they're like, okay, we want to offer a course of business analytics for our third year students, which means that everyone has to go through it because I told my students that they get to play a major role in the coming years because the data strategy role would be a key role in the market for next 10 to 15 years.
So I'm going to open up the floor. If Tarinbhai, if you don't have an additional comment, I'll open up the floor.
Yes.
Okay. If there are any questions, please feel free. I think Peter's getting ready.
Yeah, it's maybe not so much a question. I mean, I fully agree that that data-driven decision is the way forward, and that we have for our company we have embarked on that journey, and we can clearly see visible results on understanding our sales. Once we got into I would say an automated sales system. Instead of doing like we did when I came out here, manual invoicing. So clearly getting that data and understanding how to use it, which I think is super important, as you said, is one part of it. The other part is the quality of data that you can get if you are dependent on, you can say, external providers of data. one thing I would use for our sake, we were using how to say market share data that was done by Nielsen in Bangladesh before. But if you have a retail universe that is very, very much how to say manual with all the shops that you have here, I think that's where I think Bangladesh still has a huge challenge. So you can't really get scanner data that you would get in other markets. And the outlets where you get it, like the modern trade you have here in Bangladesh, well, they are not really representative for the entire industry. So I think that's where Bangladesh would still sit on a challenge in terms of the quality of data.
I'm actually glad that you picked this up because one of the companies I advise right now, they are working on such a product, which is I completely agree that you don't have the scanner data, right? But for the retail markets, like the ground level, root level retailers, such as the mom and pop stores we have in our villages or even like suburbs. So one very interesting tool is like just a simple pictures which recognizes handwritings. So, in fact, there is a large project going on in Bangladesh, which is like, I think the name of the project is Ekushe, which is like a handwriting recognition library. So, building up like, understanding handwriting, because that's good enough. Because today, everyone has phones and everyone has camera phones. All they have to do is like, provide that picture. And if the system is out there in the, like, and the platform where they can read these handwritten receipts, that's already a score.
I think you're still, I mean, yes, and that's probably the way forward, but I think you are still very much reliant on also that particular retailer then to keep all his receipts where it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be a solution, but I think it's still a few years down the road. But I might be surprised because things goes really fast.
Just to add into that point, Peter, I think we would benefit a lot if we had access to the government's depository of data. So a lot of the government has imposed that every store should have a cash registered that is tied to the NBR to calculate VAT. Now, if all of that data is accumulated and handled by an expert agency, I think we'll get a lot of market information. I know that is a long way away. I understand that completely, but there's no wrong hoping, right?
I think, for sure, without insulting you, I think, I mean, if you go to any wet market or any, I mean, if you go a little bit outside Gulshan, I don't think you will find many cash registers in the retailers.
No, I completely agree. So the culture needs to come in. The law is there, but enforcing of that law to build the data bank is what is lacking.
Peter, this takes me back to what Mr. Saki was telling us about Tonaiko, if I'm saying the name right.
Yes.
So I guess if you invest on giving out free software to all those wet markets and everyone saying, hey, listen, I'll give you a pad and I'll give you this beautiful software that you can use for free to get the receipts out and everything. So, that will maybe start generating some not handwritten, more like a computerized receipts. So maybe like investments, giving out softwares for free.
But I think that shouldn't be me, right? That should be a company that would do that, like likes of Nielsen or so. But yeah, I mean, it might work. I'm not saying that it will never work. I know that there were some people from Nielsen who were trying to see if they could find a way of continuing this data collection some way and maybe sell these reports to companies like ours. But I mean, when we were talking at that time with Nielsen, they also clearly said that, but it is a massive challenge to get the right quality of data.
It has a lot
for a retailer, I mean, first of all, he is more busy in serving his customers or consumers, which he probably should be anyway. They are at the end of the day providing him the how to say the food on the table, and we could see in our reports that, I mean, the reports that we received wouldn't really match our internal sales development. So I also thought at that time, but I mean, they just take the report that they provided from last month and then, let's have a look at it. Maybe we change one up, one down, and then we just submit that. Because it was
Right.
manual. Everything was manual.
It has a lot to do with the culture, that the culture has to change, and that's gradual. I just want to add that I do know of a very, very large textile manufacturer, very large, very significant. And they do have software for sure, but they still use handwritten receipts. Uh, so if they're making a huge sale, a big sale, they will just take a piece of paper and write it down. We call it Roshid back in the days, right? So those things are still there. You know, it's as
There is
surprising.
also an advantage of that in terms of how much you have to pay in tax and VAT and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Not saying anything, not accusing anyone for anything, right? But it's just
No, no, very well pointed out. Just wanted to add, Peter is the managing director of Arla Food Bangladesh Limited. Um, I also have another question for Saqif. I was wondering if you could tell us how data can also, most of the Nordic Chamber members are B2B companies. So maybe if you could shed some light on how B2B companies can also benefit from data strategies, especially in the power and the garment sector.
So even for B2B, I mean, the volume is not high, right? So for retailer, we get massive volumes of data. But I think even for B2B, we do have data points. So if you're looking at garments, we're looking at quality points. We're looking at supplier quality. We're looking at machine quality. We're looking at production quality. And I think these data touch points are very useful because, I mean, you identify repeat offenders. You identify repeat excels. So if I give you an example, again, unfortunately, can't name the company, but a large tobacco in Bangladesh did a study on project on their wholesalers and retailers and who to give what level of credit for. The thing of giving credits to the retailers and deciding on the credit amounts and a rating of retailers for their credits. So the same thing was done, was planned by iFarmer once with few seed shops across few rural regions, and the same goal that the farmers need a lot of credit when buying those seeds. So how much credit could be given to each of these shops based on their past performances, past purchases, past returns, and all these. So even though these data sets are not that huge, the beauty of these data sets is that they are, at least they give us some idea to narrow down on algorithms. So that would be my answer, that what we do for retails could be easily done for B2B as well, in terms of quality, in terms of optimization, because these are basic algorithms. So another example, if I could give you, again, a Bangladeshi example, would be a mobile wallet company, like are one of the biggest mobile wallet companies. They once were suffering from the fact that they have more retailers in their database than the ones they expected. So they were expecting false retailers or fake retailers. And the way to control that was very simple. So they built an inspection team in their company. And that inspection team of 250 inspectors would be located all across Bangladesh. And their task in the morning would be that they have a device, and the device was given to them by the company. And they'll just go around they'll be given a route map. And through that route map, they'll go along, take pictures. And that route map will be SMS to them in the morning of their office day. Now, the beauty of this is there could be a chance that an inspector and a fake retailer is collaborating together to send a picture. And these people have to send pictures, and every picture, every mobile picture comes with a geocode. So it could be a collaboration, in which case we also found a very simple way that, say, each store in a month would have 5 pictures taken on it. Say 5 geolocations. A very simple calculation is a standard deviation, like just finding out what is the standard deviation between the 5 geolocations. And if the standard deviation is a little high, that means, okay, one picture is not where it should be. So simple, very simple things. I mean, when we were scratching the head on how to find a fake, because when we were given that problem, that who's a fake retailer, now the biggest problem is we don't know the exact geolocation of the right retailer. If they knew, then the problem is solved to start with. So without even knowing where the fake retailer is, we figured it out. And again, just 5 data points is all we needed. So just examples of how, B2B businesses can benefit a lot from data as well. Mashur, you're mute.
If there are questions from the participants, I would encourage you to ask them now. We are almost at the end of the webinar, so if anyone wants to join in. While you're thinking about it, I'll ask another follow-up question then. How can companies develop skills of their existing resources to be data-driven, and how can you evaluate their performance?
So I think this is where companies need to be a little strategic. So as I have been saying in my presentation as well, that even a manager, even someone in a business, like a simple like lead manager, or say a sales manager, or someone in the mid level of an organization who's not working too much with numbers, even that person needs to have a level of data literacy to make the best use of data strategy. So I think one of the challenges at this point is a lot of data training that happens right now is around very technical ones, like teaching a language, teaching a tool. But these are for startups, like the entry positions. But I think to make the best use of the talent, how to develop the talent, I think the organization needs to go through different levels of training, with senior or mid-level managers understanding the concept and the utilization, whereas analysts knowing how to do it, where say business intelligence, knowing what to get from the analyst to what to drive the business decision with, what to communicate with the leadership to drive the decision. So I think it requires different stages of training and different levels of technicality or conceptuality in each of the trainings.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, any questions from the participants? Payal bhai, Tarin bhai, Romeric, or anyone else for that matter?
No, I don't think the participants have any questions there. So if we would like to wrap it up, I think this would be a good time.
Good time. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tarin bhai. Thank you so much, Saqif. It was a very insightful session. I'm glad to have had Mr. Khan Muhammad Saqiful Islam joining us for this particular discussion. It was my pleasure to be your host today. We hope that the webinar today, Data-Driven Strategy and Culture in the Organization, was insightful for you. Before bidding a farewell to you today, I would request you to follow our social media pages, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube regarding NCCI activity. Please reach out to the Secretariat if you have any concerns. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. Mashur Rahman signing off. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thank you.